Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, a name that even today remains an epitome of patriotism. The sight of her images mounted on a horse with a sword in both hands, vanquishing her enemies, still fills our hearts with immense pride today. But did you know that there was a time when it was widely believed that women were meant only to stay behind the veil? However, it was Rani Lakshmibai who arrived to completely transform this very mindset. They ignited such a flame of revolution that the British began to falter. For years, India had suffered under British rule. But when Rani Lakshmibai entered the battlefield, even enemies trembled at her sword's gleam. Her courage, valor and sacrifice still live in every Indian's heart today. You must have read the poem penned by Subhadra Kumari Chauhan. The thrones began to shake, the dynasties frowned. Even old India found its new youth once again. In the year 57, that ancient sword shone bright. From the Bundala bards we heard this story. She fought valiantly, she was the Queen of Jhansi. But do you know how this revolution truly began? To understand this story, we must journey back to the era when British rule was at its peak. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and the Battle of Buxar in 1764, British authority had completely dominated India. For 100 years, the British looted, drained and exploited India. But before that, let me tell you a little about her childhood. Rani Lakshmibai was born on November 19, 1835. Although many books state her birth as 1828, the correct date is considered to be 1835. Born in a Marathi Brahmin family, Lakshmibai's real name was Manikarnika. Her father, Moropant Tambe, was an advisor in the court of Peshwa Bajirao II. And her mother, Bhagirathi Sapre, was a woman of religious thoughts. Everything was going happily in her family, but destiny gave her a difficult test in childhood. When she was just 4 years old, her mother passed away. After this, her father brought her to Bithur, located near Kanpur. In Bithur, there was Peshwa Bajirao II's court, and Manikarnika spent her childhood there. From childhood, she was different from ordinary girls. She had a passion for learning horseback riding, sword fighting, and the art of war. At a young age, she had mastered weaponry. This was why she later became the Queen of Jhansi and proved to be the biggest threat to the British. In childhood, Manu had two closest friends. One was Nana Sahib and the other, Tatya Tope. Nana Sahib was the son of Maratha Peshwa Bajirao II. When the British stopped his pension, he rebelled against British rule and led the 1857 revolt from Kanpur. Tatya Tope was a trusted confidant of Rani Lakshmibai, a skilled strategist, adept in warfare, and played a crucial role in the rebellion against the British. The heroes Manu, Nana Sahib, and Tatya Tope, these three played together since childhood and made mischief, but destiny had something else entirely written for them. One day, these three will become the British's greatest foes. Rani Lakshmibai was also known as Chabili in her youth. Chabili was Nana of Kanpur's foster sister. Lakshmibai, her father's only child, she was. With Nana she would study, with Nana she would play. Spear, shield, sword, and dagger, these were her only friends. Brave Shivaji's sagas, she knew them all by heart. From Bundala bards, we heard this very story. She fought like a man. She was Jhansi's brave queen. With her beauty and vivacious charm, she won everyone's heart. From childhood she grew up listening to tales of Shivaji, Mahabharata and Ramayana. These stories instilled in her a deep sense of patriotism and courage. It is said that when Manu was young, an astrologer told her father that his daughter was no ordinary girl. She would become a queen one day. But little did people know then that she wouldn't be just any queen, but the queen of the battlefield. Manu was slowly growing up. She had mastered horsemanship, swordsmanship, and strategy. However, destiny had something else entirely planned for her. In 1850, at the young age of just 14, she was married to King Gangadhar Rao Newalkar of Jhansi. Manu, once the lively girl from Kanpur, had now become Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi. The people of Jhansi accepted her wholeheartedly, and the Rani, with complete devotion, dedicated herself to the protection and governance of Jhansi. Then, in 1851, Rani Lakshmibai gave birth to a son, whom she named Damodar Rao. The entire kingdom rejoiced in this happiness, but this joy was not to last. Just 4 months later, Damodar Rao passed away. This sorrow shook Raja Gangadhar Rao to his core. He began to weaken both mentally and physically. In this situation, he adopted Anand Rao, a child of his cousin Vasudev Rao Newalkar, and named him Damodar Rao. However, at that time, the British Governor-General Dalhousie had implemented a cruel policy in India, the doctrine of lapse, commonly known as the policy of annexation. According to this policy, if a state's king died without a direct heir, it would be annexed by the British Empire. Jhansi was also destined to fall victim to this policy. King Gangadhar Rao had no biological child. He only had an adopted son, Damodar Rao. King Gangadhar Rao then flatly refused to surrender Jhansi to the British. The British remained silent for a while, but they were not ones to concede defeat. In 1853, when King Gangadhar Rao's health deteriorated severely, he passed away. And no sooner had the king passed away than the British revealed their true colors. They conspired and sent Queen Lakshmibai a letter, ordering her to abandon Jhansi. Just imagine, an 18-year-old girl whose husband had just passed away with no children of her own. She had lost her husband's protection, and now the British were poised to seize Jhansi. But it's said that God only gives tough challenges to those who have the strength to bear them. If you ever feel that the sorrow in your life is too great, then remember Rani Lakshmibai. She had lost her husband, her children, and was now about to lose Jhansi. But still, she did not give up. Then the British told her, abandon Jhansi fort. But Lakshmibai clearly declared, I will not give up my Jhansi. Now Queen Lakshmibai at 19 began to manage Jhansi. After some time, she would meditate. Then at 8 a.m. she'd reach the court. Then for the next 3 hours, she'd review military readiness reports, discuss with military officers, and analyze British policies. These tasks would conclude by noon. Then she would meet Jhansi's needy subjects. She held a strong belief in charity, so she would give alms to the poor and to monks. After her midday meal, she would return to court by 3, where she would oversee judicial matters, revenue, and financial departments. She continued working until the evening, and then, after a brief period of rest, she would immerse herself in books on history and military strategy. This was her rigorous and disciplined life during that era, and it was precisely this discipline that forged her into one of history's greatest warriors. It was due to Rani Lakshmibai's dedication and loyalty that the people of Jhansi began to see her as their own mother. Indeed, her subjects were her family, and Jhansi, it was her very soul. However, the year 1854 was about to write a dark chapter in the history of Jhansi. The British government then officially ordered Jhansi's annexation into the East India Company. Rani Lakshmibai made every possible effort against this. She pleaded for justice, appealed in the court, but Lord Dalhousie wouldn't budge from his decision. Some British officers were also in the Queen's favor, but their efforts were futile against the government. That night, Jhansi Fort was plunged into darkness, but a fierce storm was brewing in the Queen's heart. Holding her son Damodar Rao in her lap, she stood by the window, gazing at Jhansi's massive walls. These were the very walls that remained unconquered during her reign, but now she had to abandon them. Tears welled up in her eyes. Just then, a harsh voice echoed from behind. Jhansi is now the property of the British government. You will have to vacate it. The Queen slowly turned and looked back. Her eyes were no longer moist, but a fire of firm resolve was burning. She placed her sword on Jhansi's soil for the last time, and pausing, she said, Today I am leaving my fort, but remember, one day I will surely take it back. That night, Rani Lakshmibai left the Jhansi fort with her son. She then moved into a small mansion nearby. But her struggle didn't end there. The British fixed her monthly pension at only 5,000 rupees. This pension was inadequate, not for a queen, but even for a common British citizen. Moreover, even her jewels were confiscated. The Queen, who had dedicated everything for Jhansi, was now given a lower status than even an ordinary British citizen. But Rani Lakshmibai was not one to give up so easily. She was constantly searching for a way to get Jhansi back. That's when she heard a name, John Lang. John Lang was an Australian lawyer who had won cases against the East India Company. He also detested the unjust British government policies. The Queen immediately ordered John Lang to be summoned into her presence. 50 horsemen were dispatched to welcome him. A small box was placed inside the palanquin, which contained foreign liquor and beer, nestled among ice cubes. When John Lang saw this, he realized that Rani Lakshmibai was not just an ordinary woman. When he arrived in Jhansi and met the Queen, he wrote in his book about Rani Lakshmibai, describing her as a woman of medium height and strong build. Her face was perfectly round and quite beautiful. Her complexion was exceedingly fair. She wore no ornaments or jewelry, only small drop-shaped earrings adorned her ears. But behind this grandeur and grace, a broken queen stood. The Queen asked in a grave tone, "Can my Jhansi be returned?" John Lang remained silent for a while. Then he slowly bowed his head. "Your Highness, this struggle is futile. The British government will never return Jhansi to you." With that, he turned and left. Time passed, and the British government ignored all demands to increase the Queen's pension. In Jhansi, voices of protest slowly began to rise, but they were not effective enough to shake the British rule. However, within Rani Lakshmibai, the flame of rebellion had now ignited. She had realized that pleading for justice would achieve nothing. Now it was time to fulfill the promise she had made before leaving. "I will not give up my Jhansi." The injustice that had been done to the Queen of Jhansi in 1854 was now being repeated with Nana Sahib. Peshwa Baji Rao II also had no biological child. That is why he had adopted Nana Sahib. But the British also began to manipulate Nana Sahib's pension. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib was raising his voice against British rule. Military revolts were occurring in many places, but the British government would crush these uprisings before they could even surface. This was their method. Any resistance was rooted out immediately. Meanwhile, Rani Lakshmibai wrote a letter to Nana Sahib. Nana, the time for pleading with the British is past. Now, open war against them is essential. This letter ignited a spark of revolution in Nana Sahib's heart. The fire of rebellion began to spread. Flames of protest erupted in Meerut, Delhi, Kanpur and Lucknow. In Delhi, Bahadur Shah Zafar was declared emperor. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib took charge. In Lucknow, Begum Hazrat Mahal sounded the bugle against the British. But the British crushed the resistance everywhere. Their biggest weapon was divide and rule. They were making sure that the Indian revolutionaries could not unite. Wherever even a faint spark of revolutionary fire would ignite, it was instantly extinguished. Gradually, the year 1857 finally arrived. Now, British brutality had reached its peak. The farmers' situation had gone from bad to worse. The British had forcibly taken their crops. The atrocities committed by the landlords were constantly increasing. The people were being subjected to heavy taxes. But the most significant blow to Indians occurred when the British attacked their religious beliefs. The British Army had, at that time, supplied Indian soldiers with new Enfield rifles. The cartridges for these rifles had to be bitten open. A few days later, news spread like wildfire that these cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat. It was an unbearable insult for both Hindus and Muslims. For Hindus, cows were sacred. They considered them mothers and couldn't even imagine their slaughter. While for Muslims, pigs were forbidden, haram. They couldn't even touch them. Hearing this news, Indian soldiers erupted in outrage. It was not just a cartridge. The flames of revolution were just about to erupt. At that time, there was an Indian sepoy in the British East India Company's army, whose name was Mangal Pandey. When Mangal Pandey discovered that the British had insulted his religion, his blood boiled with rage. That day, he took up his gun and attacked the British officers. This was unexpected for the British. They immediately arrested Mangal Pandey and sentenced him to death. Mangal Pandey was to be hanged in 1857, but the British government got scared. They feared that publicly executing such a prominent rebel could provoke soldiers. So, they advanced the execution date by 10 days. On April 8, 1857, Mangal Pandey was executed by hanging. But this cunning move by the British proved to be in vain. News of Mangal Pandey's martyrdom spread like wildfire across the land. Now, in every corner of India, the cry echoed, "Enough! A revolution must happen." Indian soldiers in Meerut cantonment grew restless. This unrest was now about to turn into a terrible explosion. On the night of May 10, 1857, a strange silence hung over Meerut. This silence was the calm before the storm. No sound was heard all around, but a fire burned deep within their hearts. Suddenly, as the clock's hands struck midnight, Indian soldiers raised their guns. Silently, the barracks were set ablaze, and those British officers who had committed atrocities against Indian soldiers and common citizens were killed. This was the first spark of rebellion, now poised to spread across the entire nation. The news of this uprising spread like wildfire. From Kanpur, Lucknow, Delhi to Jhansi, the fire of revolution had ignited in every direction. In Delhi, the Indian sepoys had already declared Bahadur Shah Zafar as their emperor. This was a very significant blow to the entire British Empire. Now, in the narrow streets of Delhi, the name of the British could not even be heard. All Indians had united, and this struggle was not merely a sepoy mutiny, but the beginning of India's freedom struggle. Meanwhile, in Kanpur, Nana Sahib Peshwa had taken charge. His leadership was instilling a new hope in soldiers and common citizens. Under Nana Sahib's leadership, Indian sepoys had surrounded the British from all sides. Fierce fighting continued for weeks. Indian soldiers fought with fierce determination. During this time, the British tried their best, but they couldn't withstand the Indians' courage and struggle. It was then that a fierce conflict erupted at Sati Chauragat, located on the banks of the Ganga. Indian soldiers suddenly unleashed a hail of bullets on British troops. This attack was extremely deadly. Blood began to flow in the Ganga's waters, and screams echoed in the air around the Ghat. This massacre was recorded in history as the infamous Sati Chauragat massacre. This scene not only became a symbol of the courage of Indian soldiers, but it also represented their longing for freedom and their anger against the British Empire. The waters of the Ganga had now turned red, as if the time had come to write a new chapter for the country. Meanwhile, Rani Lakshmibai had re-established her rule over the fort, but the real horror had just begun. The British wives, their children, all of them were now attacked. This assault was not only carried out ruthlessly, but it also became known as the Bibighar massacre. The killing of these innocent women and children caused panic in the British rule. The British then delivered a stern message: no mercy now, only vengeance. British officers decided that no leniency would be shown. As soon as this order came, many officers cried, "No lawyer, no argument. Tie every Indian rebel to a cannon and blow them up. Give public hangings on the streets. Strip Bahadur Shah Zafar's grandsons half-naked, then shoot them point-blank." Wherever the flames of rebellion rose in Delhi, Kanpur, Lucknow, the British tried to crush it mercilessly. Piles of dead bodies began to accumulate on the streets. Rebel soldiers were captured, tied to cannons, and blown apart. Not even children and women were spared. Bahadur Shah Zafar's sons were brought naked and shot point-blank. The British army had now grown utterly ruthless. For them, this was no war, but a battle of vengeance. Gradually, this conflict reached Jhansi. Rani Lakshmibai tried everything to confront British tactics and military strength. But the problem was that Jhansi now had only 1,000 soldiers left. This number was nothing compared to the British army. The Queen made an immediate decision: forge connections, make allies, and gather support. She proceeded to form alliances with kings around Jhansi. Some offered their support, but the rulers of Orcha and Datia flatly refused. These rulers not only refused aid, but joined the British against Jhansi. The Queen would not tolerate this. She took command with her soldiers and swiftly crushed the Orcha Datia rebellion. Jhansi was steadily growing stronger. The British attempted many attacks, but each time they were forced to retreat from Jhansi's formidable walls. From August of 1857 until March of 1858, Rani Lakshmibai governed the entirety of Jhansi. She was no longer just a queen. She had become Jhansi's sword. At this time, rebellion was at its peak throughout North India, and the British also understood that if they captured Jhansi, this rebellion would end. So, the British government summoned its most experienced and ruthless commander, Hugh Rose. Hugh Rose was no ordinary general. He was famous for his diplomacy and aggression in the Crimean War. Upon his arrival, he began his campaign in January 1858. Hugh Rose's army began to rapidly advance towards Jhansi. On the way, he conquered many forts like Sehore, Rahatgarh, and Bampur, all of which were Jhansi's allied states. Now, Lakshmibai clearly understood that Jhansi alone would not be able to withstand this storm. She immediately sent a message to Tatia Tope. "Jhansi is in danger. Bring the army." Tatia Tope, without wasting time, began to march with his army to help Jhansi, but it was taking them a long time to arrive. Meanwhile, Hugh Rose reached the borders of Jhansi on March 20th, 1858. From Jhansi's fort, British army flags could be seen waving in the distance. Cannons had been deployed, and soldiers stood ready for battle. Hugh Rose then launched a fierce attack on the fort. Day and night, the roar of cannons resounded in Jhansi's sky. But the Queen and her soldiers were not the kind to give up. They responded bravely to every single attack. The cannonballs were raining down, swords were gleaming brightly, and soldiers fought to their last breath. Then suddenly, from outside Jhansi, news of relief arrived. Tatia Tope had come, but it was too late. Hugh Rose had already completed all his preparations. Tatia Tope's army was surrounded and suppressed. They were so badly defeated that they couldn't even make it to help Jhansi. Jhansi was now alone. Its walls had become quite weak. Hugh Rose's soldiers were just about to enter the fort. Then the Queen's army launched a fierce attack, but the British had pistols and many cannons, allowing them to successfully breach the fort. As soon as they entered, they set fire all around. There was a cloud of smoke all around. The fort walls had crumbled from the English cannons' fire, but Rani Lakshmibai was nowhere to be found. British soldiers began to capture the fort, but it was not an easy battle. The Queen's remaining soldiers were prepared to fight to their very last breath. The Queen's army fought with such ferocity that British soldiers were forced to hide in terror. Many British documents recorded that their army was so panicked they were firing from behind walls. Rani Lakshmibai and her warriors were cutting down enemies on every street, on every front. But Jhansi was no longer standing. Now, Jhansi's walls had been broken. Many British soldiers had stormed their way inside. Dead bodies were strewn everywhere. The Queen now had only one option: to leave Jhansi so the war could continue. She picked up her adopted son, Damodar Rao, and tied him tightly to the horse Badal's back. Then she jumped from the fort's high wall. Horse Badal was sacrificed, but Queen Lakshmibai managed to escape. In the darkness of night, she set out for Kalpi with her fighters. As morning broke, the British army set the entire city on fire. 5,000 innocent people were burned alive. Children, old people, women, no one escaped this massacre. Cries echoed in the streets of Jhansi. The British army unleashed such a rampage, whose echo was forever recorded in history. But the Queen of Jhansi was still alive. When the Queen reached Kalpi, where Tatya Tope and Rao Saheb were already present, it was decided that Gwalior must be captured. Gwalior was the very region where the Maratha Scindia had come under British rule. Rani Lakshmibai and Tatya Tope launched their attack. The brave surviving soldiers from Jhansi gave their very last ounce of strength, and Gwalior was triumphantly conquered. Scindia fled. Gwalior was now under the control of the freedom fighters. The Queen now possessed a powerful fortress, a formidable army, and was ready for a final decisive war. But the English army, pursuing, also reached Gwalior. Hugh Rose now unleashed his full might. On June 17, 1858, Rani Lakshmibai fought like a tigress at Gwalior's Phul Bagh. Captain Rodriguez later stated he had never seen a warrior like Rani Lakshmibai. The Queen, on horseback, held the reins with her teeth so she could wield her sword with both hands. With every single blow, her enemies were falling to the ground. But then, Hugh Rose's secret army deployed an entire camel contingent into battle. This was Hugh Rose's most lethal tactic. The British, mounted on camels, suddenly attacked the already weary Indian army. Now, the Queen's soldiers began to retreat. British troops were now firing wildly, but the Queen refused to give up. She was fighting till her last breath. But how many could one queen fight alone? While fighting, a deep sword cut struck his shoulder, and then a bullet found its way into his body. The wounds were deep, blood was flowing in streams, but in his eyes there was still the same flame of freedom. The seriously injured queen reached a nearby temple. There, a priest gave her holy Ganges water. Her body was writhing in pain, but on her lips, just one plea: take care of Damodar. And then this brave heroine breathed her last. The British army feared that if the queen's mortal remains fell into Indian hands, the revolutionary spirit would become even more powerful. Therefore, some of her trusted soldiers collected wood in a nearby forest and cremated the queen. After the queen's heroic demise, Jhansi was overthrown. Slowly but surely, the flame of the revolution began to fade. Tatya Tope continued his struggle, but after 1 year he was captured and hanged in Shivpuri. In Delhi, Bahadur Shah Zafar's successors were brutally murdered at the Khuni Darwaza. Nana Sahib fled to Nepal. After the war ended, General Hugh Rose stated, "Only man among the rebels," meaning among the revolutionaries, only one was as brave as men, Rani Lakshmibai. Yet these same British, who now praised their bravery, were unwilling to return Jhansi at that time. The 1857 revolution, though it failed, shook the very foundations of the British. The Government of India Act was passed, and India, moving from the East India Company, came directly under the British Crown. India had now officially been transformed into British India. Rani Lakshmibai's sacrifice was not in vain. Her courage, her valor, and her rebellious spirit became immortal in every Indian's heart. History marked her not merely as a warrior, but as a true and lasting inspiration. At just 23, she confronted the British, becoming an inspiration that will never fade. I hope you all enjoyed Rani Lakshmibai's heroic tale. If you've watched the video this far, I have a special request. Please comment and tell us whose brave story you'd like to hear after Rani Lakshmibai's inspiring saga. And if you are speaking of Gondwana's immortal warrior queen, Rani Dai.